So with these concepts of individualism, and collectivism, and what we've talked about so far, I think it'd be also good to define a couple terms that have been very prevalent in our conversations around this recently: racism and anti-racism. So, where do those fit into this conversation?
That's a good question. So, like, one thing I've recognized working with a lot of white folks is that white people's understanding of racism is like very inconsistent with people of color's understanding of racism. And it's also like white people think of racism as like these discrete actions. Like they'll think of the KKK, they'll think of lynchings, they'll think of like things that you do to a black person or a person of color directly that we can see. And it's like, oh, that is a racist act. However, the truth about like what racism is, it's like racism is not a discrete, like measurable, just one or two things. Racism is a system. So like when we're talking about racism, racism is any system that is created to exclude people from something that they would benefit from accessing based on my perception of the negativity of their race. So like, let's take, for instance, slavery. White people would say slavery was bad because they beat black people and they didn't pay them and they were mean to black people. So like those are discrete, measurable things. That's not what makes slavery racist. What made it racist is that black people could not partake in parts of the system that would have heavily benefited us, like education, reading, like everything essentially, like anything that America had that was going well, they were like, but not for the blacks. So like that's what made it racist. And then like, you know, and you even get into these like proxies for racism of like, let's say college is a good one. So like college costs a lot of money. And you know, I think this comes from when knowledge was viewed as a commodity of like, especially of the wealthy. It's like, well, we don't believe that certain people, if you don't have money, you shouldn't get to access college. And now we, you know, look at the data. Oh, well, like, look at all the people who don't have money. The blacks, the people of color, Latino people. It's like, we didn't mean to do that. Like, we didn't do it because we didn't like them. It's just like, it just happened that way. And so like that becomes this proxy racism where when you start excluding or making things exclusive based on resources, especially past resources. So someone who comes from a family with money is more likely to be able to go to college. And then we know in our history who we kept from getting money. So it is just a proxy that this is going to be a racist system. If college is like just not affordable unless you're rich, that's going to be racist because of our history, you know?
Yeah. Then what about anti-racism?
So like, anti-racism is the opposite of what I just said. You can think of it as the unbuilding of this system. Like if racism is the building of a system that keeps people from accessing things that would benefit them, then anti-racism is the unbuilding of a system that keeps people from accessing things that would benefit them based on race. Or you could even think of it as the building of a system that allows access to the things that people need based on, you know, and when we get to that part about perceived negative characteristics, this is one of the things that I've had to teach a lot about at schools of equity. And like for some reason white people think that equity, inclusion, diversity is like we're all different but that's okay. That's not equity. And it's not inclusion either. If you were to think about this through a lens of inclusion, it's we're all different and that's the only way this will be okay. If we take it back to my comparison earlier, the analogy of like the Leave It to Beaver, where we're thinking about individualism, like individualistic culture, white culture has this one way to succeed, this one set of assets or values that makes you in turn successful. And so when someone deviates from that, it feels like a threat. It feels like a threat to success, or we would just rather label them. They don't have all the stuff I said we should have, so they are bad.
Yeah.
But that is not like the lens we should be looking at this through. It's like, if I go back to the slavery or even the college example, so you are a black person who doesn't have money because of systemic racism and oppression. And we also know that we need you here because of your different past, you think differently than we do. You're going to solve problems differently than we do. You're going to do stuff better than us. So instead of saying, oh, that person doesn't have any money and that's okay, they don't have to go to college, it's a reframe of, wow, this person doesn't have money because of things that we did in the past on purpose.
Right.
And now we want to correct that. We want to value this person's differences regardless of what things they have. And so that's where that goes back to that individualism versus collectivism. In a collectivist society, you can be valuable without having all the accoutrements of being valuable. You don't have to have the bling, or you don't have to have the money flowing. You don't have to have the trust fund. We're just like, that person is valuable. Let me figure out how to include them.
Right. So is there a middle space here where one can be not racist and not anti-racist, or is there like a passivity to any of this, or are we constantly in one of the two camps?
So like, I think about this as, like I said earlier, racism and anti-racism are not these discrete actions. They're like a lens. They're a mindset. I've heard people describe before, when people talk about culture, they say it's like not the things we do, but it's the water. It's the stuff that's around us. It's the environment. And so if we think about that, if racism is the water in America. We were founded on racism. We were made to uplift the white male experience, and it worked. Like our country is founded on a system that works really well. It does exactly what it was made to do. It's the water. Right. And so like, if you were to ask a fish, is it wet? Not to him. Yeah. He just thinks that's the world. And so like, the question is not like, can you be in the middle? It's not like, are you racist? It's not, are you anti-racist? It's, is the fish wet? And the answer is yes and no. Like, he's in the water, but to him, there's no such thing as dry. If the fish was ever dry, he's dead. So he's not going to know. Yeah. But then he also doesn't know he's wet. And so it takes an outside perspective to tell him, And so I just think about how, because we live in this water, until somebody changes the water in the tank, then we're all always on our way. Yeah. We're always working toward anti-racism inside of this racist water.
Sure.